The Benjamin Dixon Show is only possible with listener support. Go to www.thebenjamindixonshow.com to register for our blog and join the Progressive Army.
And it couldn't get worse. This is worse. This makes no sense. This is impossible. My girl, my 14-year-old baby. And for those of you who know my Jamie, she was the life of the party. She was the energy in the room. She made people laugh. And yes, sometimes she made us cry. But she was always known. She always made her presence felt. I sent her to school yesterday. She was supposed to be safe.
That was the voice of Fred Gutenberg, whose daughter, 14-year-old Jamie Gutenberg, was killed in the massacre at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland, Florida. I spent the better part of yesterday thinking, well, how do we change this? How do we honestly change this? And feeling as though we were complicit in it because we're not doing. And it came to me. Two things came to me. One was from the Majority Report, Sam Cedar, calling out the mere fact that we're not even, as journalists, focusing on the companies who are making millions and billions of dollars off of these weapons. We're not even focusing on that. So I'm going to place a focus on that. But then two, the thing that actually came to me is that we are dealing with an extremist organization in the NRA, and we are not responding with an extreme reaction. We are trying to, and when I say we, I mean every single one of us. There's very few people in the United States of America who are willing to say that we need to take every single gun off the street. Yet we are dealing with an organization on the right end of the spectrum that is saying that every single person in America needs a gun. We need more guns than we have people in America. We need to make sure that there are guns in the hands of teachers, guns in the hands of preachers, guns in the hands of doctors at the hospitals, just in case somebody comes and shoot it up. So we're dealing with an extreme, and we don't have a counterbalance. We don't have a countervailing force. We don't have an equal opposite reaction to that extreme. And so what happens is that you have all of us who are genuflecting before the NRA's demands because we are afraid to present a counterbalance extreme. Whether we believe it or not, whether we believe that we should take every single gun off the street or not, I believe that the only solution to this is for us to have a counterbalance, a countervailing force that will push back against the extremeness. They are a terrorist organization. They use intimidation. The actual definition of terrorism is using violence or intimidation. The NRA is an extremist organization, a terrorist organization that wants to see guns in the hands of every single American, every child, every teacher, every corner, every institution. Everyone should have guns, and they're doing it on behalf of gun manufacturers. We stop at the NRA and we don't talk about the gun manufacturers. And so it has to be a two-pronged approach. And so if we're ever going to get out of this ridiculous cycle, the never-ending cycle of madness, we're going to have to offer a countervailing force to the NRA's extremism. Take a listen in a little bit more to Fred as he talks about his daughter.
In the morning, sometimes things get so crazy, she runs out behind, and she's like, I gotta go, Dad, bye. And I don't always get to say, I love you. I don't remember if I said that to Jamie yesterday morning. Jamie was such a special kid. All of the kids here are. What is unfathomable is Jamie took a bullet and is dead.
There is no greater fear than the fear of losing your child. And there's no grimmer reality than when your child is gone. I can't even entertain the idea in my mind right now. I can't, but I just want us to understand that what's happening to us isn't being done to us by anyone else but us. And it's hurting and killing our children, our babies. And this is in a concentrated mass shooting style problem that we have on an ongoing basis. But then on the opposite side of the equation, you also have the every single day killing of kids in urban centers in Chicago. Like the Republicans always like to say, Chicago yes, it does have a violence problem. It has a gun violence problem, and our children are dying. Can you imagine how many children, people would be alive right now if there were no guns in this country? And just me saying that alone already is triggering a reaction in the minds of some progressives, of some liberals, of Democrats, people who are opposed to the NRA. There's a knee-jerk reaction to that statement because that's an extreme statement. But is it any more extreme than what the NRA pushes down our throat? Is it any more extreme than the reality of what these guns are doing to us? Is it any more extreme than the straw men that the NRA constantly puts up about us going after their guns? And in reality, we're not going after their guns. We can barely even get an 18-year-old from being able, stop an 18-year-old from being able to buy an AR-15 in the candy aisle at Walmart. You know, we can't even really have that conversation. We can't talk about the most modest of changes because the NRA is an extremist organization. They are a terrorist organization using intimidation, and we are fighting an asymmetrical fight against an organization that is perfectly groomed and perfectly positioned itself to always be able to push the envelope further and further and further. They have their politicians, but more importantly than the politicians they have the discourse, because there's nobody out there who's willing to say, take every single goddamn gun off the street. And without a countervailing force, we're always going to get pushed further and further and further to the right. Without someone screaming for communism, we'll always get the furthest and furthest extremes and excesses of capitalism. Likewise, without someone saying take every single gun off the street, and not just saying it, organizing around it, fundraising around it, running advertisements about it. Without that, you're going to forever have the NRA, who is increasing in power and reach and authority in this country. And subsequently, you're going to always continue to have gun violence like we've never seen before. But how many times have we had to see this?
I don't know what I do next. My wife is home. We are broken. But I can tell you, don't tell me there's no such thing as gun violence. It happened in Parkland.
And to add insult to the unimaginable injury, politicians have been rolled out to defend the standard talking points. Paul Ryan is the most disgusting human being on the face of the planet. He is a dangerous individual, and he must be stopped politically. He must be put out of office. He is a sociopath. And he got into a press conference yesterday and made it seem as though that we have exactly what we need in this country to stop gun violence if only our system that we have properly set up would work.
We passed legislation on mental health. We want to make sure that if someone's in the mental health system that they don't get a gun if they're not supposed to get a gun. We will find out as facts come out whether there was a breakdown in the system or not here today. As you also know, we passed legislation cleaning up the instant check background check system. That bill, with others, is sitting over in the United States Senate. So if there's someone who's not supposed to get a gun who's getting a gun, then we got to figure out why that's happening and fix that. That's a piece of legislation we already passed that's sitting in the Senate. And one thing we know is if there are early indications for mental illness, I think we probably have to do a better job of trying to make sure that people don't get slipped through the cracks.
So, yeah, there he is, talking about legislation that they passed to fix the mental health problems with guns. And you know how sick and twisted this sociopath is? The legislation that Paul Ryan passed and that Donald Trump signed into a law last year, what they passed actually got rid of and undid President Obama's policy that kept guns out of the hands of mentally severely mentally ill individuals. And he looks at you and he says, we have things to fix this. We have systems in place, when they are literally undoing the systems. And the law that Obama passed wasn't an end all to be all. It wasn't a fix. It was almost a token piece, a token victory, right? I think it was going to add about 75,000 people to a list of people who could not get weapons because of their severe mental illness. That's not the kind of fix we need to actually solve the problem, because the problem is that people without mental illnesses are getting access to legal guns, and they are committing these crimes, and then we blame it on mental illness so that we never have to move the ball forward on the reality that these people are extremely sober when they do this. These people are extremely cogent. They are doing something that they plan, something that is premeditated, something that they think is going to bring them fame. They think it's a solution. They are out there lashing out to a society that rejected them. That's not a mental illness. That's called being a... And the problem is that we're allowing too many of these type of boys, these men, predominantly white men, who have a problem with their position and their caste in life, their lot in life. They're not Chads, they're betas. And they're disgusted, and they are infuriated with the fact that they are outcast from the mainstream of society. I'm sorry, that's just a part of life. But that's not a mental illness. And Republicans constantly blaming this on mental illness is just another way to keep the conversation from ever going to where it has to go. People who are legally able to get guns and kill a lot of people, not because they're evil, not because they are mentally ill, but because that's what they want to do on that day. And as long as we have easy access to weapons of mass destruction, weapons that can kill so many people in so many seconds, the AR-15 gets off 600 rounds in 1 minute. As long as they could do that type of destruction, well, we'll be back here having the same conversation over and over and over again. But listen to this. Listen to Paul Ryan's sociopathy.
Mr. Speaker, should law enforcement be able to confiscate a weapon from someone who has exhibited signs of mental illness?
Like I said before, this is not the time to jump to some conclusion, not knowing the full facts. We've got a lot of more information we need to know. But if someone who is mentally ill is sleeping through the cracks and getting a gun, because we have laws on the books. We have a system to prevent people who aren't supposed to get guns from getting guns.
And here it is. They are limiting the people who shouldn't get guns to people who are mentally ill, as though mentally ill people are a plague on our society. They're blaming all of this on the mentally ill. There are so many, and that's such a broad term. That's such a broad-reaching ableist term that is nothing more than a deflection. It is a distraction from the reality that the real people who don't need to get guns are people who in their rage can't process their anger except for to hurt other people. And I'm sorry, that's really the majority of Americans. How many people are just living on edge, and if they had access to a gun would do something that they may later regret, or maybe they would think it makes them famous? That is the problem here in America. And it's not the fault of people with mental illnesses. It's the fault of a system that allows people in their rage to get access to easy guns. So we're dealing with extremists. We're dealing with an extremist terrorist organization by the name of the NRA that is using intimidation of politicians, intimidation of the masses, intimidation of families who've lost loved ones. They use intimidation to get their political agenda across. They are a terrorist organization of the most extreme type, and they control the entire Overton window when it comes to the conversation on gun control. There should be no gun control whatsoever, according to them. In 1968, there were 300 million weapons in the United States. Manufacturing has increased since then. There are more guns in America than there are American citizens. And yet it's not enough. And so we're fighting an asymmetrical fight that we cannot win. We cannot win unless we return fire with fire. Unless we bring a countervailing force, an equal opposite reaction to the extremism of the NRA. People, whether you believe it or not, we have to start advocating for all guns to come off the streets. Why? Because that's what they're telling their supporters we're doing anyway. And so long as their supporters are afraid of that, they are going to respond politically in a way that keeps us from making a single millimeter of progress on gun control. Continuously leaving us exposed, leaving our children exposed, leaving our churches exposed, leaving our homes exposed, leaving the inner cities exposed to extreme gun violence at random times. So it is a national security issue, and it should be promoted as a national security issue. It is in the interest of the existence of the United States. We won't be destroyed from without. We will be destroyed from within, not by a civil war, but by us simply killing ourselves, killing off generations. The more access we have to guns, the more retaliations that take place, the more copycat school shootings that take place. It is an existential threat to the United States of America, and we need to present it as such and go for the gusto. Why? Because they're telling their supporters that's what we're doing anyway, and we're not making any progress right now. It's simple. I mean, it really is simple as what I said earlier in the show. Without an extreme to counterbalance an extreme, one side is always going to win. In a war, the person who's willing to fight the deadliest and the dirtiest, that's who's going to win. America knows that. That's how America stays in power. And we are not in a position to even gain a single inch, not even a millimeter of progress. Not even, we are so far from being able to get a single thing because they're telling their supporters that we're coming after their guns. And you know what? Let's go after their guns and create a dialectic so that what is resolved in the middle is something that is sensible. But what we have right now is so far from sensible, it is absurd. And who's paying the price? The most innocent among us, children. Every day in Chicago, they're so concerned about Chicago, right? They're only concerned about it from the extent that they can use it to say that there's something inherently wrong with black people. They're not concerned about it from a perspective of how many people would not be dead if they didn't have access to guns. And of course, the obvious rebuttal is going to be, well, if they didn't have access to guns, they'd kill people with knives. You know what? I'll take my chances with a knife. How about that? I would gladly take my chances with a madman running up at me with a knife than a coward madman standing back 100 yards shooting at me with a gun. So that's it for me today. The question on the table is, what do you think? What do you think? Should we go extreme? Should we be as extreme as the NRA says we are? Because we sure as hell, we're not getting any progress being, equivocating and saying, we need sensible gun control. Since sensible gun control doesn't work for them, how about we just get every single gun off the street and then watch them respond with sensible gun control? Should we go for the gusto and say every single gun, or should we just start, modestly and say get every AR-15 off the street, stop manufacturing them? Or should we say that no one under 21? See, I'm going in the wrong direction because that's sensible gun control. They don't want sensible gun control, you see. So since they don't want sensible gun control, then let us find a countervailing force to the NRA and be as extreme against guns as they are extreme in favor of every single woman, man, child, boy, girl having a gun. Tell me what you think. 857-600-0518. Leave me a voicemail. If I have time, I'll do some voicemails tonight for a bonus show. And thanks so much for listening in. See you next time.
The Benjamin Dixon Show is only possible with listener support. Go to www.thebenjamindixonshow.com to register for our blog and join the Progressive Army.